I need it. Okay, a fast 5-minute review. Key verses or verse to the book of John. Quote it, please. And? Does that help you? Many?
Many things have been written.
No. Steve, can you quote it? Jason?
Many other signs and wonders Jesus or something like that.
Oh, you guys are pitiful.
But these are written for you and me.
Between the three of us.
All right, all together now, watch my lips. Ready? Many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. So, John 20, verses 30 and 31 tell us that the author has picked out signs. And the signs are there to bring about belief. And that is why we have this book in the Bible. It's a book of signs that lead people to trust in Jesus Christ. What are the signs in John chapter 1? Some of the major signs. Quickly, we only have 5 minutes. Well, how does John chapter 1 divide up? We have the witness of who, and the witness of who else, and the witness of who else. Quickly, this is supposed to be in your head. Okay, the pre-incarnate signs of the Son witnessed by who? Who's telling us? Pardon? Yeah, the whole Bible is from God. Well, he's revealing it through John, right? So we have signs both from Christ pre-incarnate. So pre-incarnate signs, such as, there's a whole bunch of them. What do we, pardon? Yes, I'm asking you. Right? He's the creator. Right? Right? Eternality, association with the Father, revealer or word, right? Omniscience, darkness did not overcome him, right? And then when he came into the world, the incarnate signs, that is while he was enfleshed, we find some of these signs indicated by John the Baptist and by his disciples. So what are some of the things that what is one of the first things that John reveals about Jesus Christ? John the Baptist. All right? Okay, so what does a forerunning witness to a person indicate about the person? Right? So Christ is preeminent. That is in honor and rank, his relationships. All right? That's really what John teaches us, that Christ is preeminent. He's more important than me. He's before me in rank. He's before me in time. John reinforces some of these other things that John the Baptist reinforces some of the signs about Christ that John the Beloved introduces us to Christ. Right? What is it the disciples show us about Jesus Christ? Or what did Christ show in the presence of his first disciples? Pardon? All right. Leadership. What kind of a leader? Well, how did he show his power in chapter 1? Okay, what kind of power? There's other words that omniscience. All right. So he's omniscient. He knew where Nathaniel was the day before. He never met him. Right. He named Peter, having first laid eyes on him. Renamed him. What was the first? What are the first words of Jesus in the book of John? What seek you? What does that tell you about this leader? He certainly isn't aloof. Aloof, standoffish, unconcerned. Right? So it tells us that he is concerned. He also reveals himself. He's a revealer. Nathaniel calls him King of Israel. He's established here as the Messiah. Right? It's at this point in chapter 1. So there's a lot of different signs. There are a dozen or more signs about Jesus Christ introduced in a general way in chapter 1. What are the signs in chapter 2? You want to elaborate on that? I would like you to. Well, obviously you're here to learn. Okay, which one do you see in the first part of the chapter? All right, so you have glorious work. What was the work that he did? Turned water into wine, right? That was a manifestation of, what is it, grace? Was he being gracious or truthful when he did that? He was actually manifesting grace. So that's really the sign. When Jesus turned water into wine, he was being very gracious, right? He did it in a very glorious way. You know, who else? Have you ever met anybody who can turn elements into something else? Right? In the second part of chapter 2, what is the sign there? All right. So another glorious work, and he manifests truth. What is the truth that he especially manifested there?
Destroy the temple and his body for reason.
Right. So he predicted his own resurrection. At the outset of his ministry, he predicted he would be killed, and in 3 days they would raise up the body of the temple of his body. Right? So we have particular signs about Christ in chapter 2. What is the sign that we see all the way through chapter 3? There are different, widely separated events in time, but what is the sign of chapter 3? Yes, he's a revealer of heavenly things. Heavenly things. Right? Nicodemus says nobody can do these things except God be with him. So he insinuated or implied that Jesus was come down from God, and Nicodemus said, "You're absolutely right. To see the kingdom of heaven, where I come from, you have to be born into it. Right? You have to be born again. To enter, you have to be born into it. Right? And that's why he came, so that people can believe and have eternal life. Right? And he told Nicodemus, "We speak things that we know about. If I've been telling you heavenly things, and you don't believe those things, how in the world do you think?" No, he turned it around. He says, "If I have been telling you about earthly things, like how the wind works and stuff like that, how are you going to? If you don't believe that, how are you going to believe heavenly things? If I tell you?" And that was a real indicator right there in chapter 3, verse 11, that Jesus was really talking about heavenly things. At the end of the chapter, John the Baptist pointed his finger and said, he's the bridegroom, and I'm the friend of the bridegroom. I'm preparing the way for the bridegroom, right? He's worthy of more honor. Why? Because he's been sent down from heaven to speak things that God in heaven has told him to speak. So, revealer of heavenly truth. It sort of relates to this point here. What is the sign of chapter 4? We just finished chapter 4.
Oh yeah. Show all things.
Good. Sign of a prophet. Right? Right. That is telling all things. How do we see that?
She says it over and over.
Who did he first convince that he was a prophet? Samaritan woman. He told her all about her own personal private life. He had never met her before. And that convinced her, sir, I perceive, verse 20, you must be a prophet, or verse 19. Right? And so she then asks him a tough theological question, and he answers that. And she's beginning to scratch her head. Well, you know, one thing I've been taught ever since I was a kid, she says, is that when Messiah comes, this is one thing he'll be able to do, tell us everything we want to know. And Jesus blatantly claimed right then and there, I am he. And so she leaves her water pot, runs into town, and what does she say to her friends? Hey, I met a man that told me everything I did. Right? So they came out. They invited him back into town. He stayed there for 2 days. And they said to her after that, we believe not just because of what you said, but because we have heard him tell us all things. We've heard him with our own ears. Right? So this is repeated. Now, how does the miracle of the healing the nobleman's son at the end of chapter 4, this is the first part of chapter 4, the second part of chapter 4 is the nobleman's son. How does that corroborate the same sign? What's the point of connection between Christ telling the woman all things and the miracle at the end of chapter 4? Well, what was the nature of the miracle? Just think about how did it work? Did Jesus walk up to the kid and go, kapow, and heal him? Where was Jesus when he did the miracle? Jesus was in Cana, and where was the kid? Kid was in Capernaum. We're talking a distance of 10 miles maybe, 10 or 15 miles. Where was the kid's father? Right? So we have Jesus and the father over here in Cana. We have the child over in Capernaum. So how does this miracle just simply corroborate the sign of a prophet?
Said it would happen.
Okay. Not only could he tell this man that his son was going to be healed, but in fact, it actually happened. Remember, we actually went back to Deuteronomy chapter 18. Remember, the key is Deuteronomy chapter 18, because it was back in the Old Testament that Moses had declared that the one way you can tell if you have a true prophet of God in your hands is that whatever he says, if it comes to pass, that's how you can tell. So here we have the prophet's words telling this woman all things, and in chapter 4b, right at the end of the chapter, this is the proof of that this is a prophet, because he said to the man that your son lives. The man had no way of verifying that information. The only way you could really tell if Jesus was a true prophet is if the kid was actually healed. So he went home, and his servants met him on the road, and they said, such and such a time yesterday afternoon, your son was healed. See? And so his words came true. So this verifies that the sign that he manifested to the woman was a true sign, that he really was a prophet. Okay? Sign of the prophet. Chapter 3, sign of a heavenly messenger. All right? Now we come to chapter 5. And what is the sign? Okay, it revolves around the miracle of healing an impotent man who was laying beside a pool of water for 38 years. Yes, key is showing he has the sign of authority, of divine authority. What is the sign of authority in our society? How would you recognize somebody had authority?
They do something to do it.
That's right. They can punish you if you don't do what they tell you what to do. So who is it that actually carries the authority then? Who are the people that execute the authority of the government? The executive arm of the judiciary is? No. Who is it in our society that tells you what to do and you do it? Law is a book.
Administrators of the law.
Okay, the administrators of the law. Who are?
Court system. Judges.
Okay, court system, judges, and also police. Right? They have limited powers. They have limited powers of what they can do. But if they tell you to spread eagle yourself up against the side of a car, you do it. Right? They have the authority to do that. If they get a warrant, they can come into your house. Right? They can tell you what to do. So, the sign of authority is someone being able to do something that ordinary people ordinarily can't do. Right? In Jewish society, what was one thing that nobody could do? They couldn't work on the Sabbath day. If you research the culture of Shabbat in the Jewish Mishnah, which is their theology book that was written in the mid-intertestament period between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there were 39 specific laws that impinged on what people could or could not do on the Sabbath day. Just on the news last week, I heard that when Saddam Hussein sent his, I think it was right after the first missile was sent over, that the rabbinate in Jerusalem, the high priest or the chief rabbi or whatever, issued a special decree absolving Orthodox Jews from punishment or guilt if they were to work on the Sabbath by putting on gas masks. That's considered work, putting on a hat on the Sabbath. Right? I'm sorry? That's right. That's right. So it just, even among the Orthodox Jews today, the Sabbath is so encrusted, there's very little that an Orthodox Jew can do. Right? So we're talking about authority now. And how did Jesus demonstrate his authority in John chapter 5?
Word of the Sabbath.
Pardon?
He showed himself word of the Sabbath.
How?
By healing on the Sabbath.
Yeah, he did a work on the Sabbath day. The work was a humanitarian work. It was a good work. Yeah. And when he did that, when he told this man, when he healed this man, and then told him to pick up his bed and go home, this man was breaking the Sabbath law, one of the laws. You're not supposed to walk anywhere. You're not supposed to carry anything on the Sabbath day. You're not even supposed to carry sticks for a fire. Remember I told you about that book I was reading, the Bodhi Canaan series? Zion Chronicles or whatever. You could always tell, during the Second World War, they could tell the Jewish section of Warsaw from the Christian section, because the Christian section would always have, all their chimneys would have smoke coming out of them on Saturday. In the Jewish section, all their chimneys, no fires be burning on Saturday, because to light a fire and to arrange sticks to build a fire is work. So they wouldn't work on Saturday. Right? So Jesus worked on a Saturday. By the way, did God work on Saturday? Yeah, he ceased working on the seventh day. Yes, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That's a little different. Okay. Now let's turn to John chapter 5. I asked you to break down part of this chapter so that we can follow our way through it. Oh, I was going to give you a little outline here to follow. Now that we reviewed the signs, it took a little longer than 5 minutes. You're too slow. You're supposed to have this at the top of your head, like right here.
Do you see this?
I might. Remind me, okay? Okay, here's my outline for John chapter 5 that I'll be following through this morning. So Jesus is evidence. His authority in 1 to 18. In verses 1 to 16, he evidences authority through a miracle that he did on a Saturday. And verses 17 to 18 through his claim to divine sonship. That brought a severe reaction, and still Jesus had then to argue his authority. In verses 19 to 47. First we have in verses 19 to 31, Jesus' own witness, that is self-defense. Okay, we have in 19, he restated his claim. Elaborated his claim. And 23b to 29 applied his claim. And in 30 to 31, he summarized his claim. And then in verses 32 to 47, Jesus gave us his supporting claims, witnesses, not claims, witnesses. And that was the section you were supposed to have seen some kind of order in. Verse 32, another witness. 33 to 35, John the Baptist. 36, Father. 37 to 36 is his works. (37 to 38), Father. 39 to 47, Scripture.
The last one I said. 30 and 31.
Pardon? 39 to 47.
30 to 31, so.
Where? Here?
Yeah.
Summarized. Does that make John chapter 5 make sense for you? Right? He does a miracle in the first 18 verses, evidencing his authority, and then he speaks the rest of John chapter 5, arguing his authority. He gives his own self-defense in verses 19 to 31. This is how he does it. He restates his claim, he elaborates on his claim, he applies and summarizes his claim. And then in verses 32 to 47, he adds his own supporting witnesses. Witness of a second person, required by law. John the Baptist was a witness. His own present works and miracles that he was doing, they were supposed to testify. These people were supposed to get nitpicky at him for doing something on the Sabbath. They were supposed to recognize that this was a miracle. You know, ordinary people don't do stuff like this. It must be God here. Right? The Father and the Scriptures all argue for Christ's authority. Key verse to this chapter is what? Did I tell you? Actually uses the word authority one time in this chapter. Authority? No, I don't think it uses the word itself but once. Verse 27. The Father has given him, the Son, authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. That's the most direct reference to the whole point at issue. And who has the right? Who has the power or the authority to break some law? Well, the lawmaker. You know, our government does it all the time. Every time they amend a piece of legislation, they're basically breaking the law. Did you know that? Parliament has the authority in this country to make law, and Parliament can rescind or amend. That is, completely do away with or add changes to the law. And when they do that, they're basically breaking the law. If I tried to amend the law, hey, that doesn't count. You know, they throw you the slammer or throw the book at you or charge you, fine you. Okay, now let's look at the text and work our way through. This is the outline that we'll be following this morning. We are only going to spend this next class on John 5, then we'll be leaving it, and I'll be giving you an assignment at the end of this class for John chapter 6. We have to make tracks.
What's the vernacular for
The scriptures. I want you to note that this theme of having divine authority, even to break or to rescind or to supersede a law, like the Sabbath laws. This,
you broke their law, not his law.
well, actually, it was a combination of both, actually. Jesus actually did work on the Sabbath. He did tell this man to pick up his bed and walk. And there are very precise revelations in the Old Testament that forbade that sort of activity, right? But it was a humanitarian act, number one. And number two, he actually claimed to be the Father. He actually claimed to be God.
Was there a provision in the Old Testament as well?
I'm not sure.
It says if your ox falls down, if your falls down a well, you would take it out. Of course you will.
This was a real debate among Orthodox people.
And what the Jews want, they did have some measure of understanding what God's will was for its humanitarian.
That's a good point.
They get caught up in their legalism, but if there's a real sincerity, they're not ignorance. Blind.
Well, one thing I want you to see is that in this chapter there are words that relate to the subject of authority, like judgment and condemnation and damnation and witnesses, testify, truth, and accusing. These are all words that come up in Jesus' defense here, starting in verse 19 and going to the end of the chapter. It's very obvious that he's defending himself. He's defending his right, his authority to do this. Let's look at the miracle. First of all, how about we read it? We'll just do one verse at a time. We'll start here and go right across and then come back until we've read the first 18 verses. No.
Am I reading?
Mm-hmm. Nice and loudly so it comes out on the tape here.
After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in Hebrew
Bethesda.
having 5 porches.
In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water.
For an angel went down at a certain season to the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had.
And a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years.
When Jesus saw him lying, he knew that he had been now a long time in that case. He said unto him, Wilt thou be made whole?
The boatman answered him, Sir, I have no man, and the water is troubled to put me into the pool. While I am coming, another stepped down before me.
Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk.
And immediately the man was made well and took up his bed and walked, and the same day was the Sabbath.
The Jews therefore saith unto him that was
Cured.
cured. It is the Sabbath day, it is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed.
He answered them, He that made me well, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk.
Then asked they him, What man is that which said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk?
And he that was healed knew not who it was, for Jesus had moved away a multitude, being in the pool.
And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, the multitude being in that place.
Afterward, Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said to him, Behold, thou art made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come.
The man departed, and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole.
And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day.
But Jesus answered them, My Father worketh hitherto, and I work.
Therefore, the Jews sought the more to kill him, because he not only broken the Sabbath, but he said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God.
Okay, that's good. So we've read the miracle. We've read about in these 18 verses the two causes why the Jews tried to kill Jesus, and they were serious charges according to the Jewish law. What had Jesus done? Two things: blasphemy, which was a capital crime, and secondly, breaking the Sabbath day, also a capital crime. You can't get any more. You can't become any more of a lawbreaker in the Jewish psyche, in their mind, their way of thinking, their outlook. Hey, blasphemy is an unforgivable thing, and breaking the Sabbath was likewise a heinous crime, and both were capital crimes, punishable by death. No wonder Jesus had to defend himself, right? And if you just hold your finger here, we'll come back in a moment, but Jesus made reference to this miracle on another occasion. In chapter 7, when Jesus was gone down to Jerusalem many months later, the people still were looking for his head. Verse 19. John chapter 7 verse 19. Did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keepeth the law? Why do you people, this is Jesus speaking, why do you people go about to kill me? The people answered and said, You have a demon. Who goes about to kill you? Jesus answered and said unto them, I have done one work, and you all marvel. What work is he referring to? Killing this man in chapter 5. That's John chapter 7 verse 21. He had done one thing in Jerusalem that they, of course, it already says in chapter 3 that he did miracles, remember? That was why Nicodemus sought Jesus out, because he had done many miracles at the Passover. But evidently he hadn't broken any of their little taboos in doing so. And this time, this was a very outstanding example of a no-no. One work, Jesus said, I have done, and you people are still going around trying to kill me. All right? See, chapter 6, where do the events in chapter 6 take place? Galilee. This is where the feeding of the 5,000, walking in the water, the big discourse in the synagogue in Capernaum. That's all way up north. So the next time he's down in Jerusalem, chapter 7, this comes up again, this miracle that he did in chapter 5. Right?
Why does he get, so that he broke the Sabbath, but all he did was speak, really?
Where does it say he broke the Sabbath?
Moses' work, which is what he actually do, all he was speak. That's what it does.
Well, he told this man, he was responsible for the man's actions. Like the man had been caught carrying his cot on the Sabbath day. And when they asked him why you're doing this, who told you could do this? The man said, well, the guy that healed me, he said, take your bed and go home, And so when they found out it was Jesus that had done this, then they discovered that he had actually done a miracle, he had worked, and he had also he had given bad advice. You can't aid and abet a crime. He was really responsible for this man doing what he was doing. If you plan a murder and then hire some guy to shoot somebody, that guy will probably be put away, but you too, because you are the one that instigated the crime. That's just as serious, even in our laws. You both be equally guilty. All right? So Jesus evidences his authority through his miracle work on the Sabbath day. This was evidence of his divine authority to change a divinely instituted law that required no work on the Sabbath. If you want to read it, Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 11 is the original commandment: honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Thou shalt do no work therein. Nehemiah chapter 13. At the end of the Old Testament history is another example of a godly man reinstituting the proper observance of the original law. Jeremiah chapters 21 and 22 is an instance where God's prophet laments the failure of God's people to observe the law. And it's no wonder that the people they got angry and they tried to kill him. They tried to execute the legalistic punishment on Jesus. Now again, what Steve said is a good point, because the law did make provision for humanitarian acts. And yet the populace was divided. Of course, who were the strict adherents of the law? The Pharisees. They were the ones that would have insisted that no matter how good this was on the surface, it was still breaking the law. Right? Who would have been the more liberal-minded people in the society? Just the average person. They realized that this was a good deed. He was healing this poor guy. Sadducees were a little less picky about it too. They were pretty liberal-minded people, left-wingers sort of thing. All right. And so this miracle is a pretty good example of Jesus taking the law into his own hands, really. And before we leave this miracle, I just want to draw to your attention that there is a textual problem in chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. In fact, in some Bibles, this may be in italics, or there would be a note that half of verse 3, the last half of verse 3, beginning with the word waiting, and all of verse 4 are missing in the oldest manuscripts. It's not until the time of Tertullian, who was a church father that lived in the 2nd century, that this verse and a half was actually included in the text of Scripture. Right? So the very oldest copies of the New Testament delete all of verse 4 and the last part of verse 3. It makes no difference, really, in the final outcome. Don't let it trouble you. But the point is that when the man responded to Jesus in verse 7, remember, Jesus said, would you like me to heal you? And the man said, well, sir, I don't have anybody to put me into the water. When the water is troubled, then somebody always beats me to the water. And somebody figured, well, later on when people read this account of Jesus healing this man, they're going to wonder, what's this about the troubling of the water? There's got to be an explanation for that. Why was the man so worried about somebody beating him to the water? So somebody wrote in verses 3b and 4, the superstition that prevailed among the simple Jewish people.
He's a superstition.
Yeah.
You guys reading it for how long? when you signing up.
The explanation that Unger gives and other writers is that it was probably an intermittent spring, that it would bubble up and overflow, something like Old Faithful, out west, that it, at a fairly predictable interval, the ground pressures just cause the water to come out of the ground, so it bubbles out of the ground. The Jews had this superstition that whoever would step first in the water would be healed. Right? It doesn't say that anybody was healed. No, but I mean it's not something that was done according to the hand of a prophet either, which is the way God normally heals. Through an individual, a gifted person. Right? So most commentators consider this to be an ancient superstitious tradition that was inserted later on by someone to help explain the man's words in verse 7. Now you can leave out verses 3 and 4 and have no problem understanding.
Where's Christ rebuking the situation?
Pardon?
Is it superstition? Where's Christ rebuking? Like, I'm not doubting it, I'm just, usually there's some element of truth behind every.
So the element of truth is that no doubt the water did bubble up out of the ground intermittently, and no doubt there was a scramble for, but I mean,
Well, it's just
so what? They're mistaken. I'm sure Jesus wasn't interested in getting sidetracked. He just wanted to.
I've had friends that have been through something like that. Like Lourdes, it's a real questionable thing.
Lourdes? Yeah.
But I've had a friend, she was a cripple, but for days she'd walk home.
She's still a cripple? Power of the mind is the power of the mind is phenomenal. Or Fatima in Spain.
It's hard.
Or the face of Mary on the tree crotch in Sault Ste. Marie. Or the face of Mary on the floor in the bathroom of a mechanic's shop down in Texas. The power of suggestion, is just phenomenal. So, yes, we enlightened North Americans are, I don't think, a whole lot better off today than these people back then. As the scriptures say, let him that is ignorant be ignorant still. It actually says that in the book of Revelation. Okay, God has revealed himself. If you want to ignore it, believe what you want to believe, well, God isn't going to do nothing to you. I think this is probably an example of that. Why didn't Christ rebuke all of these people laying around the pool? It's a valid question. And I think that the reason being is that it's not God's purpose to reveal his truth to everyone. He's chosen the way he's going to do it. He enlightens the elect. He's given his word for people to believe.
Is this man being saved, or is it just a question of God showing his power?
Well, in this case, I think it's more a demonstration of Christ's divine power and authority than anything. Now, whether or not the man was saved, I have no idea. He was physically healed, okay, on the Sabbath, which is the point. Okay, so we leave it. It doesn't really change the story at all. It's just what the man believed or is said to have believed. All right, so Jesus broke the Sabbath day, told this man to walk, and it came back on him when they found out. And the result was the Jews sought to persecute Jesus, sought to slay him, in fact, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. It was what he did that offended them. Verses 17 and 18, Jesus got himself in 100% deeper. So to defend himself, Jesus said, look at verse 17. What did he say? My Father works on Saturday, and I do. So this is a claim to divine sonship. Very much an evidence in the face of opposition that he had the divine authority to be and to do what his Father in heaven was and did too. Notice that this statement was interpreted accurately by the people. How did the Jews interpret this statement? Right? I want you to notice something. A lot of people today don't believe that Jesus Christ is really claiming to be God. Right? Jehovah's Witnesses will try to downplay such scriptures as that.